Ms. Harper, an experienced fifth-grade teacher at Willow Creek Elementary in suburban Ohio, was known among her colleagues and students for her strict demeanor and unyielding expectations. Her classroom was a place of order, every pencil sharpened, every chair precisely aligned, and she prided herself on keeping it that way. Over 25 years in education, she had cultivated an image of discipline, but those who knew her well sensed that her passion for teaching had dimmed, replaced by frustration and exhaustion. On a chilly Monday morning, Ms. Harper stood at the front of her classroom, her arms crossed as she surveyed the sea of faces before her. Her expression was as rigid as her neatly styled chignon, and her sharp eyes missed nothing. She tapped a perfectly manicured finger on the edge of her desk. "Settle down," she said, her voice slicing through the chatter. "We have a lot to cover today, and I won't tolerate any distractions." The room quieted instantly, save for the rustling of backpacks as students scrambled to pull out their notebooks. Ms. Harper's gaze swept the room before settling on the figure of Danny Lewis, a boy seated at the back of the class. Danny, who used a wheelchair due to a spinal condition, was struggling to extract his math workbook from his backpack. His fingers trembled slightly, a combination of the cold morning and the pressure of Ms. Harper's ever-watchful eye. "Danny!" Ms. Harper snapped, irritation lacing her voice. "We're waiting! You're holding up the class!" Danny's cheeks flushed as he finally managed to free his book. He mumbled an apology, avoiding her gaze. Around him, his classmates fidgeted uncomfortably. Some cast sympathetic glances his way, while others stared intently at their desks, unwilling to attract Ms. Harper's attention. Ms. Harper, seemingly unbothered by the palpable tension in the room, turned to the whiteboard. She began writing out the day's objectives in her precise, angular script. Her mind, however, was elsewhere, specifically on the towering stack of ungraded essays waiting on her desk. As the lesson progressed, Ms. Harper introduced the class to the complexities of multiplying fractions. Danny did his best to follow along, but the fast pace of the lesson made it difficult for him to keep up. Ms. Harper's voice, though clear and confident, carried an undercurrent of impatience. "Danny," she said abruptly, her tone sharper than she intended, "can you solve the problem on the board? Or is that too much to ask today?" The classroom fell silent. Danny hesitated, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair as if they could anchor him. Slowly, he wheeled himself to the front of the room, his movements awkward under the weight of Ms. Harper's scrutinizing gaze. He reached for the marker with trembling fingers, his grip unsteady. His classmates watched intently, a mixture of pity and discomfort in their eyes. After a few painstaking moments, Danny managed to write the correct answer. "Finally," Ms. Harper said, her voice clipped. "Next time, try to be quicker. We can't afford to waste time." Danny returned to his desk, his face burning with shame. His earlier confidence in math, a subject he had always enjoyed, seemed to crumble under the weight of Ms. Harper's disapproval. During recess, Danny joined his friends near the basketball court. Though he couldn't play in the traditional sense, the group had found a way to include him. Danny acted as the team's strategist, calling plays and cheering his friends on. "Nice shot, Mason," Danny called as one of his friends scored. Mason grinned, tossing the ball to another teammate. "Your turn, Danny." Danny expertly passed the ball to Mia, who dribbled toward the hoop. For a moment, Danny forgot the morning's humiliation and simply enjoyed being part of the group. But their game was cut short when Ms. Harper's sharp voice rang out from the school steps. "Recess is over. Everyone back to class." Danny hurriedly tried to maneuver his wheelchair over the uneven pavement. His friends slowed their pace, offering to help, but Ms. Harper stood by the door, her arms crossed. "Danny," she called out, her voice laced with impatience. "We don't have all day. Stop holding everyone up." Danny's friends hesitated, torn between helping him and obeying their teacher. Ms. Harper's stern expression made the decision for them. They hurried inside, leaving Danny to struggle on his own. By the time he reached the classroom, his arms ached, and his cheeks were flushed with embarrassment. As the day wore on, Ms. Harper couldn't shake a nagging feeling. While she told herself that her approach was necessary to maintain order, a small voice in the back of her mind questioned her actions. She dismissed it as a fleeting doubt, telling herself that she was simply preparing Danny for a world that wouldn't accommodate his every need. "Life is hard," she muttered to herself as she graded papers after class. "The sooner he learns that, the better." But deep down, she couldn't ignore the unease settling in her chest. The following day, the students gathered in the gymnasium for PE class. Ms. Harper stood near the bleachers, clipboard in hand, her expression as stern as ever. "Today's activity is an obstacle course," she announced, gesturing toward a series of hurdles, mats, and cones spread across the gym floor. "I expect everyone to give their best effort." The students murmured excitedly as they lined up, but Danny hesitated at the back of the line. He scanned the course nervously, realizing that most of the activities, crawling under nets, climbing over barriers, were impossible for him. Ms. Harper noticed his hesitation and walked over. "Danny," she said, her tone flat, "you can do the parts you're able to. Use your arms to pull yourself across the mats, for example." Danny nodded reluctantly, positioning his wheelchair near the starting line. As the activity began, his classmates navigated the course with varying degrees of success, cheering each other on. When it was Danny's turn, the room fell quieter. He managed the first section, a simple maneuver around cones, but struggled as he reached the mat. With great effort, he hoisted himself out of his chair and began pulling himself across the mat using his arms. His classmates watched in tense silence, many silently rooting for him, but Ms. Harper's impatience grew with each passing second. "Come on, Danny," she called out. "You're holding everyone up." Danny's arms trembled as he pushed himself forward, sweat beading on his forehead. His classmates began to murmur, their discomfort evident. Ms. Harper, however, seemed oblivious. "This is ridiculous," she muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you can't keep up, maybe you shouldn't participate in PE at all." The gymnasium fell silent. Danny froze, her words cutting through him like a knife. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. Around him, his classmates exchanged shocked glances. "Danny," Ms. Harper continued, her tone dripping with sarcasm, "look at your classmates. They're managing just fine. Why can't you do the same?" Danny's hands faltered and his head dropped. The humiliation was too much to bear. For the first time, he wished he could disappear completely. Ms. Harper, one of the parent volunteers, Mrs. Carter, had been watching the class from the doorway. A kind-hearted woman with a soft spot for children, she was appalled by what she had just witnessed. Mrs. Carter's hands shook as she observed Danny's shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. She couldn't understand how a teacher, someone entrusted with nurturing young minds, could be so cruel. Without hesitation, she turned on her heel and strode toward the principal's office. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallway, each step fueled by a mix of anger and determination. When she reached the office, she knocked firmly on the door. "Come in," Principal Weston's voice called from inside. Mrs. Carter stepped into the room, her face pale but resolute. "Principal Weston," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I need to speak with you about something very serious." Principal Weston gestured for her to sit. "Of course, Mrs. Carter. What's on your mind?" "It's about Ms. Harper and a student in her class, Danny Lewis," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I just witnessed something in PE that I can't ignore. She humiliated him in front of the entire class because of his disability." Principal Weston's brow furrowed, concern flashing in his eyes. "Please tell me exactly what happened." Mrs. Carter recounted the scene in vivid detail, her voice breaking at times as she described Danny's visible distress. By the time she finished, Principal Weston was nodding grimly. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," he said. "I assure you, this will be addressed immediately." Back in the classroom, Ms. Harper continued with her lesson as if nothing had happened. She avoided Danny's gaze, focusing instead on fractions and decimals. But her students' subdued energy didn't escape her notice. Minutes later, a sharp knock on the door interrupted her lecture. The students turned to see Principal Weston standing in the doorway, his expression unusually stern. "Miss Harper," he said, his voice calm but firm, I need to speak with you in my office. Now." Ms. Harper frowned, glancing at the clock. "Can this wait, Principal Weston? I'm in the middle of an important lesson." "I'm afraid it can't," he replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, Ms. Harper set down her chalk and addressed the class. "Continue working on the problems I've assigned. I'll be back shortly." As she followed Principal Weston down the hallway, her mind raced. She couldn't imagine what this was about. Surely it was some minor administrative matter. But the tight set of Weston's jaw made her stomach twist with unease. When they reached his office, Ms. Harper was surprised to see Mrs. Carter sitting in one of the chairs. The woman's face was pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Please have a seat, Ms. Harper," Principal Weston said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Ms. Harper complied, her back straight and her expression carefully neutral. "What's this about?" she asked, her tone brisk. Principal Weston leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Ms. Harper, we've received a serious complaint about your conduct during PE class today. Mrs. Carter witnessed the incident involving Danny Lewis and brought it to my attention." The color drained from Ms. Harper's face. "I don't understand," she said quickly. "What exactly is the issue?" Mrs. Carter spoke up, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "The issue, Ms. Harper, is that you publicly humiliated a child because of his disability. Your words were cruel and unnecessary. No child should ever be treated that way." Ms. Harper's initial reaction was one of defense. Her hands tightened around the arms of the chair as she squared her shoulders, attempting to regain her composure. "I was simply trying to encourage Danny to push himself," she said, her voice edged with indignation. "It's important for him to understand that life won't always accommodate his needs." Principal Weston's expression darkened. "Ms. Harper, that's not your decision to make. Encouragement and humiliation are two entirely different things, and what Mrs. Carter described falls firmly in the latter category." Mrs. Carter nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "You didn't just embarrass him, Ms. Harper. You made him feel small and unworthy in front of his peers." The pain in his eyes, it was heartbreaking. Ms. Harper opened her mouth to respond, but Weston raised a hand to silence her. "Your actions don't just affect Danny, Ms. Harper," he continued. "They set a tone for the entire classroom. What message do you think this sends to his classmates? That it's acceptable to demean someone because they're different?" The weight of Weston's words began to sink in, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed Ms. Harper's face. She glanced at Mrs. Carter, whose gaze held a mixture of disappointment and resolve. I never intended to hurt him," Ms. Harper said, her voice faltering. "I thought I was preparing him for the realities of the world." Weston leaned forward, his tone softening but remaining firm. "The world may be harsh, Ms. Harper, but our job as educators is to create a safe space where every child feels valued and supported. Danny deserves that as much as any other student." Ms. Harper's shoulders slumped slightly as the realization began to dawn on her. For years, she had justified her rigidity as a necessary part of maintaining order, but now she was being forced to confront the unintended consequences of her actions. As if the meeting with Weston and Carter weren't difficult enough, Ms. Harper soon learned there was another conversation she had to face. Danny's mother, Rachel Lewis, had been informed of the incident and requested an urgent meeting with the teacher. Rachel arrived at the school later that afternoon, her expression calm but resolute. She was a petite woman with a quiet strength about her, the kind of person who didn't need to raise her voice to make herself heard. "Ms. Harper," Rachel said as she entered the meeting room, her tone polite but firm. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "Of course, Mrs. Lewis," Ms. Harper replied, forcing a small smile. "I want to assure you that I take this matter very seriously." Rachel nodded, taking a seat across from her. "I hope so, because what Danny described to me last night was deeply troubling." Ms. Harper's heart sank. She could picture Danny sitting at the dinner table, recounting the events of the day in his quiet, hesitant voice. "I want to understand," Rachel continued. Why you felt it was appropriate to single out my son and demean him in front of his classmates. What lesson were you trying to teach? Ms. Harper hesitated, searching for the right words. I thought I was encouraging him to push himself, to realize his potential. But I see now that my approach may have been misguided. Misguided? Rachel repeated, her voice sharp. Ms. Harper, you told my son that he didn't belong in PE because he couldn't keep up. You compared him to his able-bodied classmates as if his worth were somehow tied to his physical abilities. Do you have any idea how damaging that is to a child? Tears pricked the corners of Ms. Harper's eyes, but she blinked them away. I realize now that I handled the situation poorly, she said quietly, and I deeply regret the pain I caused Danny. Rachel leaned forward, her voice softening slightly. Regret is a start, Ms. Harper. But regret alone isn't enough. Danny needs to know that his teacher believes in him, not just as a student but as a person, and I need to know that this won't happen again, to him or to any other child in your care. I understand, Ms. Harper said, her voice trembling. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Principal Weston, who had been observing the exchange in silence, finally spoke up. Ms. Harper, Mrs. Lewis and I have discussed a potential solution. It's clear that you need a deeper understanding of the challenges faced by students like Danny, so we'd like you to spend the next month volunteering at the Bright Futures Center for Children with Disabilities. Ms. Harper's eyes widened. She had heard of the center, a well-respected organization that provided resources and support for children with a range of physical and cognitive challenges. You'll work directly with the children and their families, Weston continued. It's an opportunity for you to see their strengths, their resilience, and their value beyond their limitations. Rachel added, This isn't about punishment, Ms. Harper. It's about growth. I believe you can change, but only if you're willing to open your mind and your heart. Ms. Harper swallowed hard. The thought of stepping into such an unfamiliar environment filled her with apprehension, but she also recognized the chance to redeem herself, not just in the eyes of her students and colleagues, but in her own. I'll do it, she said finally, her voice steady, despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. The following Monday, Ms. Harper stood nervously outside the Bright Futures Center. The building, a modern structure adorned with vibrant murals of children playing and laughing, exuded a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold knot of anxiety in her stomach. She hesitated for a moment before pushing open the glass doors and stepping inside. The receptionist greeted her with a bright smile. Good morning. You must be Ms. Harper. I'm Jessica. Welcome to Bright Futures. Thank you, Ms. Harper replied, her voice tight. Jessica handed her a clipboard with forms to fill out and explained the day's schedule. You'll be shadowing one of our coordinators, Megan, this morning. She'll introduce you to the kids and show you how we run things here. Moments later, Megan appeared, a cheerful woman with an easygoing demeanor that immediately put Ms. Harper at ease. Hi, Ms. Harper, Megan said, extending a hand. We're so glad to have you here. Let me give you a quick tour before we dive in. As they walked through the brightly lit halls, Megan pointed out various rooms. This is our art therapy space, she said, gesturing toward a room where a group of children was painting vibrant canvases. And over here is the sensory room, perfect for kids who need a little extra help regulating their emotions. Ms. Harper nodded politely, though she felt overwhelmed by the sheer variety of activities and resources. Their first stop was the gymnasium, where a group of children was participating in adaptive sports. Ms. Harper recognized some of the equipment, basketballs, cones, but noticed modifications that made them accessible to children with disabilities. Ms. Harper, this is Emma, Megan said, introducing a young girl with cerebral palsy who was maneuvering her wheelchair through an obstacle course. Emma beamed up at Ms. Harper. Hi, are you here to play with us? Ms. Harper forced a smile. Yes, I suppose I am. Emma's enthusiasm was infectious, and as Ms. Harper watched her navigate the course with determination, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced in years: admiration. Next, Megan introduced her to Noah, a boy with Down syndrome who was working on a puzzle. His concentration was intense as he carefully placed each piece, and when he finished, he looked up with a proud grin. "Look what I did," he exclaimed, holding up the completed puzzle. "That's wonderful, Noah," Megan said. She turned to Ms. Harper. "Noah has an incredible eye for detail. He's one of our best problem solvers." Ms. Harper nodded, a lump forming in her throat. She thought of Danny and how little she truly knew about him beyond his struggles in PE. As the day progressed, Ms. Harper found herself immersed in activities she never imagined she'd be part of. She read stories to a small group of children, helped a boy named Tyler with his physical therapy exercises, and even joined a game of wheelchair basketball. Each interaction challenged her preconceptions. The children weren't defined by their disabilities. They were artists, athletes, and thinkers. They faced their challenges with a resilience and joy that left Ms. Harper both humbled and inspired. During lunch, she sat with Megan and a few of the children, listening as they chatted animatedly about their favorite hobbies and dreams. Emma talked about becoming a chef, while Noah described his plans to build a robot someday. "Do you like robots, Ms. Harper?" Noah asked, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. I've never really thought about it," she admitted, her lips curving into a small smile. "You should," Noah said matter-of-factly. "Robots are awesome." For the first time in years, Ms. Harper found herself laughing, a genuine, unguarded laugh. By the end of the week, Ms. Harper felt like a different person. Each day at Bright Futures had brought new challenges and revelations, forcing her to confront her own biases and blind spots. On her final day, Megan handed her a stack of thank you cards made by the children. Each one was filled with colorful drawings and heartfelt messages. "Thank you for playing basketball with us," Emma wrote, her words accompanied by a crayon sketch of herself and Ms. Harper on the court. Ms. Harper's eyes filled with tears as she read through the cards. "I didn't do much," she said quietly. Megan smiled. "You showed up, and sometimes that's everything." When Ms. Harper returned to Willow Creek Elementary, she approached her classroom with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She knew she couldn't undo the mistakes of the past, but she was determined to move forward as a better teacher. Her first order of business was to apologize to Danny. "Danny," she said after class one afternoon, "I need to talk to you." Danny looked up warily, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair. "I owe you an apology," Ms. Harper said, her voice soft but steady. "The way I treated you during PE was wrong. I didn't see you for the amazing person you are, and I'm sorry." Danny's eyes widened, and for a moment, he was silent. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said quietly. Ms. Harper smiled, relief washing over her. "Thank you for giving me another chance." Over the following weeks, Ms. Harper transformed her classroom into a space that celebrated every student's unique strengths. She incorporated adaptive activities into her lessons, invited guest speakers to talk about resilience and inclusivity, and made a point to connect with each student on a personal level. Danny, once hesitant to participate, began to thrive. His classmates followed Ms. Harper's lead, offering encouragement and support instead of judgment. The classroom became a place of genuine collaboration and respect. One afternoon, as Danny solved a math problem on the board, Ms. Harper watched with pride. The boy who once avoided attention now stood tall, his confidence shining brightly. Ms. Harper knew she still had much to learn, but for the first time in years she felt hopeful about her role as a teacher. And for Danny, the changes in Ms. Harper weren't just a second chance. They were a testament to the power of compassion and the belief that everyone, no matter their challenges, deserves to be seen and valued. Ms. Harper, fresh from her transformative experience at the Bright Futures Center, approached the next part of her journey with cautious optimism. She'd seen the world differently through the eyes of the children at the center, and her commitment to being a better teacher was unshakable. However, she didn't realize that one final lesson awaited her, one that would cement the changes she had worked so hard to embrace. "Ms. Harper, I'd like you to meet someone very special." Megan, her mentor at the center, said one afternoon. She gestured toward a young boy nearby, seated in a brightly decorated wheelchair. The boy looked up with bright, curious eyes, his thin legs wrapped in a colorful blanket. Despite his physical limitations, his face radiated warmth and a contagious energy. "Hi, Ms. Harper," he chirped, his voice light and cheerful. "I'm Malik. Want to see my cool tricks?" Caught off guard, Ms. Harper hesitated before smiling and shaking his outstretched hand. "Sure, Malik. What kind of tricks?" Without missing a beat, Malik spun his wheelchair in a perfect circle, grinning from ear to ear. "Ta-da! I call that one the whirlwind." Ms. Harper chuckled, surprised by the boy's enthusiasm. Malik's joy and confidence immediately reminded her of Marky, though she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt as she thought of the times she had failed her own student. As the afternoon wore on, Malik eagerly shared more of his world with Ms. Harper. He demonstrated how he navigated tight corners and tricky obstacles, adapting games to fit his abilities. He even showed her how he helped younger children with their activities, guiding them with the same patience and encouragement she had once failed to offer Marky. "Sometimes it's hard," Malik admitted as they worked together on a puzzle. His voice softened, his eyes dropping to his hands. "Like when other kids stare at me or when I can't do the same things they can." Ms. Harper nodded, listening intently as he continued. "But my mom says I'm special," Malik said with a small, proud smile. "She says I can do anything if I try hard enough." Ms. Harper felt a lump form in her throat. She thought of Marky's similar determination, the way he had always tried despite the challenges she had placed before him. The shame of her past actions washed over her once more, but so did a newfound appreciation for the strength it must have taken for Marky to persevere. As the day went on, Ms. Harper watched Malik interact with other children. She saw the way he laughed freely, tackled challenges with unwavering determination, and supported his peers with kindness and encouragement. His spirit seemed unbreakable, and it was a stark contrast to how she had once viewed Marky in her classroom. That evening, Ms. Harper found herself sitting quietly at a corner table in the art room, observing the children as they painted and drew. A little girl named Lily, who struggled with limited mobility in her hands, called out to her. "Ms. Harper, can you help me hold my paintbrush?" "Of course, Lily," Ms. Harper said gently, kneeling beside the girl. Together they maneuvered the brush to create sweeping strokes across the paper. "Look!" Lily exclaimed, her face lighting up with delight. "I made a rainbow!" "It's beautiful, Lily," Ms. Harper replied, her voice filled with genuine admiration. Around the room, she saw children helping one another, adapting tools and methods to suit their unique needs. The environment was one of collaboration, understanding, and celebration of each individual's strengths. Ms. Harper couldn't help but think back to her own classroom. The image of Marky struggling to keep up, his face etched with frustration and sadness, was a stark contrast to the joyful scenes she now witnessed. During a break, Ms. Harper overheard a conversation between two boys. Jake, who had just returned from gym class, was confiding in his friend Tommy. "The other kids laughed at me when I couldn't climb the rope," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. Tommy patted his friend's shoulder reassuringly. "Hey, remember what Ms. Alona always says? We're all different, but we're all awesome in our own way." Ms. Harper felt her heart ache as she listened. She remembered the cruel words she had once spoken to Marky in gym class, the way she had dismissed his efforts and made him feel less than his peers. It was a moment that would haunt her for years, but one she was now determined to learn from. Over the next few weeks, Ms. Harper grew closer to the children at the center. She listened to their stories, celebrated their triumphs, and began to see the world through their eyes. Each child had a unique journey, and their resilience inspired her in ways she hadn't expected. One day, as she helped Malik with his homework, he looked up at her with a serious expression. "Ms. Harper," he said, his tone earnest, "do you think I could be a teacher someday? Like you?" Ms. Harper felt her breath catch. For years, she had believed children like Malik couldn't achieve such lofty goals. But as she looked into his determined eyes, she saw nothing but possibility. "Malik," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I think you can be anything you set your mind to. You'd make an amazing teacher." Malik's face lit up with a wide grin. "Really? You think so?" "I know so," Ms. Harper replied. In that moment, she realized just how much she had changed. The frustration and impatience that had once clouded her judgment were fading, replaced by a deep respect for the strength and courage of the children she had once failed to understand. The following weeks at the Bright Futures Center became a turning point for Ms. Harper. Each day brought new insights and deeper connections with the children. Malik, in particular, became a beacon of inspiration for her. One afternoon, as Ms. Harper and Malik sat together during a quiet moment, he shared more about his dreams. "I want to help kids like me someday," he said, his voice soft but resolute. Ms. Harper smiled warmly. "You already do, Malik. You've taught me so much about resilience and kindness." Malik tilted his head curiously. "Really? What did I teach you?" Ms. Harper hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "You've taught me to see beyond what's on the surface, to understand that strength doesn't always look the same for everyone, but it's always there if you take the time to notice." Malik grinned. "That's pretty cool, Ms. Harper. Maybe you should be a student here too." Ms. Harper chuckled, but his words stayed with her long after the conversation ended. The day finally came when Ms. Harper returned to her classroom. Her heart raced as she walked down the familiar halls of Willow Creek Elementary. The faces of her students greeted her with a mix of curiosity and surprise. "Good morning, class," she said, her voice softer than usual. The students exchanged glances, sensing that something was different. Ms. Harper paused, gathering her courage. "Before we begin today's lesson," she said, "I need to say something important. I owe all of you an apology." The room fell silent. Marky, seated near the back of the classroom, froze in place. His hands gripped the arms of his wheelchair tightly, his expression unreadable. "I haven't been the teacher you deserve," Ms. Harper continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I let my frustrations get the better of me, and I failed to treat you with the kindness and respect each of you deserves. Marky, I've been especially unfair to you, and for that I am deeply sorry." Marky's eyes widened, and he looked down at his desk, his face a mix of emotions. Ms. Harper walked over to his desk and knelt beside him, meeting his gaze. "Marky, your strength and determination have taught me so much. I was wrong to dismiss your efforts and to make you feel like you didn't belong. I hope you can forgive me." The classroom was eerily quiet, all eyes on Marky. After a long pause, he nodded slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Okay, Ms. Harper, I forgive you." Ms. Harper felt a wave of relief wash over her. She stood and addressed the entire class. "From now on, things will be different. This classroom will be a place where everyone feels valued and supported. We'll work together to celebrate our strengths and help each other overcome challenges." The students nodded, some smiling shyly, while others seemed cautiously hopeful. Amy, Marky's closest friend, gave him an encouraging thumbs up. Over the next few weeks, Ms. Harper worked tirelessly to create a more inclusive environment in her classroom. She incorporated lessons she had learned at the Bright Futures Center, adapting activities to ensure that all students could participate. Marky's confidence began to grow. He raised his hand more often, answered questions with enthusiasm, and even volunteered to help his classmates during group projects. One day, during a class discussion, Marky shared his thoughts on a book they had read together. His insights impressed not only Ms. Harper, but also his peers. "Great job, Marky," Ms. Harper said with a proud smile. "Your perspective is really valuable." Marky beamed, his confidence bolstered by her genuine praise. The turning point came during a parent-teacher meeting when Grace, Marky's mother, visited the classroom. "Ms. Harper?" Grace said, her voice warm but firm. "Marky has been telling me about the changes you've made. He's been so much happier and more confident lately." Ms. Harper felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you, Mrs. Valera. Your words of guidance and support were the catalyst for these changes. I'll always be grateful for the chance you gave me to do better." Grace nodded, her expression softening. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong and even more courage to change. Thank you for seeing Marky for who he truly is. Inspired by her experience, Ms. Harper collaborated with Grace and the school administration to implement new initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity. Together, they introduced workshops for teachers, programs to educate students about empathy, and new resources to support children with disabilities. The buddy system they established paired students like Marky with peers who could provide friendship and support. Marky's buddy, a kind-hearted boy named Jake, quickly became one of his closest friends. As the programs took root, the school's culture began to shift. Students helped one another without hesitation, and teachers approached their roles with renewed understanding. For Marky, the changes were profound. He no longer felt like an outsider in his own classroom. His voice was heard, his contributions valued, and his confidence soared. One afternoon, as Miss Harper observed her students working together on a group project, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. "Marky," she said, approaching his desk, "you've come so far this year. I'm incredibly proud of you." "Thanks, Miss Harper," he replied, his smile wide and genuine. "I couldn't have done it without you." As the new programs took hold, Willow Creek Elementary underwent a remarkable transformation. The school, once riddled with subtle biases and barriers, became a hub of inclusivity and understanding. Teachers worked together to create lesson plans that accommodated every student's needs, while students themselves embraced a culture of empathy. Marky, who had once shied away from participating, was now thriving. His buddy Jake became his closest ally, and the two often collaborated on projects and encouraged each other in class. During recess, they led games that included all students, ensuring no one felt left out. "Marky, catch," Jake called one day, tossing him a lightweight foam ball. Marky grinned as he caught it deftly, spinning his wheelchair to pass the ball to another student. The sight of them playing together warmed Ms. Harper's heart. She stood at the edge of the playground, watching her students with pride. "Isn't it amazing what they've accomplished?" Grace said, approaching Ms. Harper. Ms. Harper nodded, her gaze never leaving the children. "It's more than I ever imagined. They've taught me so much about resilience, kindness, and the power of community." Determined to build on this momentum, Ms. Harper dedicated herself to the school's new inclusivity programs. She worked closely with Grace to organize workshops for teachers and parents, sharing her experiences and insights from her time at the Bright Futures Center. One evening, during a staff meeting, Ms. Harper stood before her colleagues. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a stack of notes. "I want to share a story," she began. Her voice was steady, but her eyes brimmed with emotion. She recounted her journey, the mistakes she had made with Marky, the lessons she had learned from Malik, and the transformation that had reshaped her as a teacher. "I was wrong," she admitted, her voice cracking. "But I've learned that it's never too late to change. Each of us has the power to create a classroom where every child feels valued and supported." Her words resonated deeply with her colleagues. Several teachers approached her afterward, eager to learn more about how they could implement similar changes in their own classrooms. The culmination of the year came during the school's annual talent show. For weeks, the students had been rehearsing their performances, and Marky had been working on something special. As the curtains opened, Marky wheeled himself onto the stage. He wore a crisp white shirt and a confident smile. In his lap was a keyboard, customized for his needs. The audience watched in awe as Marky began to play. His fingers danced across the keys, producing a melody that filled the auditorium with warmth and emotion. When he finished, the crowd erupted in applause. Ms. Harper, seated in the front row, wiped away tears as she joined the standing ovation. "You were amazing, Marky," Jake said backstage, clapping him on the shoulder. Marky beamed. "Thanks, Jake. I couldn't have done it without everyone's support." As the school year drew to a close, Ms. Harper found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought of Marky's transformation, the friendships that had blossomed, and the inclusive culture that had taken root at Willow Creek Elementary. One afternoon, as she packed up her classroom for the summer, she discovered a note on her desk. It was written in Marky's neat handwriting. Dear Ms. Harper, thank you for believing in me and for making our classroom a place where everyone feels special. You've made a big difference in my life, and I'll never forget it. Your student, Marky. Ms. Harper clutched the note to her chest, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, she realized that the impact of her transformation extended far beyond the classroom. The following year, the school continued to build on the foundation Ms. Harper and Grace had established. New students joined the buddy system, teachers embraced inclusive practices, and the school became a model of empathy and collaboration. Ms. Harper remained at the forefront of these efforts, sharing her story with educators from other schools and encouraging them to implement similar programs. Every child has potential, she would tell them. Our job as teachers is to nurture that potential, no matter what challenges they face. Marky, now a confident and thriving student, often accompanied her to these talks, sharing his own experiences and inspiring others with his journey. Ms. Harper taught me that I can do anything, he would say proudly. And now I want to help other kids feel the same way. As the new school year began, Marky's transformation continued to inspire his peers and teachers alike. His confidence had grown so much that Principal Wilson approached him with a unique proposal. Marky, the principal said during lunch one day, we'd like you to represent the student body on the school's inclusivity committee. Your voice and experience would be invaluable in helping us create new programs and policies. Marky's eyes widened. Me? But I've never done anything like that before. Principal Wilson smiled. That's exactly why you're perfect for it. You know firsthand what it's like to feel left out and what it takes to feel included. You've already inspired so many people, Marky. I know you'll do great. After a moment of hesitation, Marky nodded, his determination shining through. Okay, I'll do it. As the new school year began, Marky's transformation continued to inspire his peers and teachers alike. His confidence had grown so much that Principal Wilson approached him with a unique proposal. Marky, the principal said during lunch one day, we'd like you to represent the student body on the school's inclusivity committee. Your voice and experience would be invaluable in helping us create new programs and policies. Marky's eyes widened. Me? But I've never done anything like that before. Principal Wilson smiled. That's exactly why you're perfect for it. You know firsthand what it's like to feel left out and what it takes to feel included. You've already inspired so many people, Marky. I know you'll do great. After a moment of hesitation, Marky nodded, his determination shining through. Okay, I'll do it. As part of the Inclusivity Committee, Marky worked closely with Ms. Harper and Grace to develop new programs for the school. One of their first projects was creating an annual Inclusivity Day, a celebration of diversity and unity, where students could showcase their talents and share their stories. In preparation for the event, Marky gave a speech during a school assembly. Nervously wheeling himself onto the stage, he took a deep breath and faced the crowd. When I first came to this school, I didn't feel like I belonged, he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. But over time, things changed. My classmates and teachers started to see me for who I really am, not just a kid in a wheelchair, but someone with ideas, dreams, and strengths. He paused, scanning the audience. Inclusivity isn't just about making room for people like me. It's about recognizing that everyone has something special to offer. And when we work together, we're stronger because of our differences. The auditorium erupted in applause as Marky finished his speech. Ms. Harper, watching from the front row, felt an overwhelming sense of pride. While the school had made significant progress, challenges still arose. One afternoon, Marky overheard a group of students making insensitive jokes about disabilities. Though the remarks weren't directed at him, they stung nonetheless. Later, during a committee meeting, Marky brought up the incident. We've made a lot of progress, but there's still work to do, he said, his voice firm. We need to educate people about why those kinds of comments hurt. The committee decided to create a peer-led workshop focused on empathy and understanding. Marky and Jake volunteered to lead the first session, sharing their personal experiences and encouraging open dialogue among their peers. The workshop was a resounding success. By the end of the session, several students approached Marky to apologize for their previous behavior. "I didn't realize how hurtful those jokes were," one student admitted. "Thanks for helping me understand." Ms. Harper, too, continued to evolve in her role as an educator. Inspired by her experience with Marky and the Bright Futures Center, she began attending professional development workshops on inclusive teaching practices. During one session, she met a fellow teacher named Mr. Patel, who shared her passion for creating accessible learning environments. The two quickly became collaborators, brainstorming innovative ways to support students with diverse needs. "I've been experimenting with universal design for learning," Mr. Patel explained. "It's all about creating lessons that work for everyone, not just the majority." Ms. Harper's eyes lit up. "That sounds amazing. I'd love to learn more." Together, they developed a series of lesson plans that incorporated visual aids, hands-on activities, and flexible assessment methods. These lessons not only benefited students with disabilities, but also enhanced the learning experience for the entire class. As the Inclusivity Day event approached, Marky came up with an ambitious idea. "What if we create a mural?" he suggested during a committee meeting. "Something that represents everyone in our school. We could paint it together as a way to show unity." The idea was met with enthusiasm, and plans were quickly set in motion. Marky worked closely with the art teacher, Ms. Diaz, to design the mural. It featured a vibrant tree with branches extending outward, each leaf bearing the name of a student or staff member. On the day of the event, students and teachers gathered in the courtyard to paint the mural together. The atmosphere was electric with excitement and camaraderie, as everyone contributed their unique touch to the project. By the end of the day, the mural stood as a powerful symbol of the school's commitment to inclusivity. A few weeks later, Ms. Harper received an unexpected email from Malik's mother, inviting her to visit the Bright Futures Center for a special event. "Malik has been working on something he wants to share with you," the email read. Curious, Ms. Harper eagerly accepted the invitation. When she arrived at the center, she found Malik waiting with a wide grin and a stack of papers in his lap. "Hi, Ms. Harper," Malik exclaimed. "I wrote a story and it's all about you and Marky." Ms. Harper's eyes widened. "You did? Can I read it?" "Actually," Malik said, his grin widening, "I want to read it to you." As Malik began to read his story, a heartfelt tale about friendship, resilience, and the power of change, Ms. Harper felt tears stream down her face. Malik's words captured not only her journey, but also the impact that Marky and the other children had made on her life. "Thank you, Malik," she said when he finished. "This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received." Word of the changes at Willow Creek Elementary began to spread beyond the school. Other educators and administrators reached out to Ms. Harper and Grace, eager to learn from their success. "We'd like to implement a buddy system at our school," one principal said during a conference. "Could you guide us through the process?" Grace and Ms. Harper collaborated to create a comprehensive guide for schools interested in adopting similar programs. Their efforts culminated in a series of workshops and webinars, reaching educators across the district. Marky, now a confident speaker, often joined these events to share his perspective. "It's not about fixing people," he would say. "It's about creating spaces where everyone can be themselves and succeed." As the years passed, the culture of inclusivity at Willow Creek Elementary became a cornerstone of its identity. The programs initiated by Ms. Harper, Grace, and Marky continued to grow, benefiting countless students and inspiring lasting change. Ms. Harper, reflecting on her journey, often thought of the moment she first knelt beside Marky's desk to apologize. It had been the start of a transformation, not just for her, but for the entire school. Looking back, she realized that the true lessons of her career had come not from textbooks or training manuals, but from the students who had taught her the meaning of courage, empathy, and hope. As the Inclusivity Committee began preparing for the next phase of their initiatives, Marky was approached with a unique opportunity. Principal Wilson had been in contact with a local nonprofit organization. that worked with students to develop leadership skills. They were looking for young leaders to represent their schools in a district-wide youth leadership summit. "Marky, I think you'd be an excellent representative for Willow Creek," Principal Wilson said during a meeting. Marky blinked in surprise. "Me? At a leadership summit? What would I even say?" "You've already done so much for our school," Ms. Harper chimed in. "Your voice has inspired change here, and I know it can do the same on a larger scale." After some encouragement, Marky agreed to participate. He spent the next few weeks preparing his presentation with the help of Ms. Harper and Grace. The day of the summit arrived, and Marky found himself standing backstage in a large auditorium. Dozens of students from across the district filled the seats, each representing their schools. Marky's turn came quickly, and as he wheeled himself onto the stage, a hush fell over the audience. He took a deep breath, remembering the words of encouragement Ms. Harper had given him earlier. "Just speak from the heart, Marky. That's all you need to do." "Good morning," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside him. "My name is Marky, and I want to tell you about a time when I didn't feel like I belonged." He shared his story with honesty, recounting the struggles he faced as a student with a disability and how the changes at Willow Creek had transformed his experience. "Inclusivity isn't just about making space for people like me," he concluded. "It's about seeing everyone as valuable no matter their abilities. When we work together, we create something stronger than we ever could on our own." The audience erupted in applause, and Marky's heart swelled with pride. After the summit, the Inclusivity Committee received numerous inquiries from other schools interested in replicating Willow Creek's success. Ms. Harper, Grace, and Marky took on the challenge, traveling to neighboring schools to share their insights and strategies. One memorable visit took them to Jefferson Middle School, a larger campus with a more diverse student body. During their presentation, a student named Emily stood up and shared her own story of feeling excluded because of her learning disability. "I always feel like I'm behind," Emily admitted, her voice trembling. "But hearing Marky talk about his experiences makes me think maybe I can do more than I thought." Marky smiled warmly. "You absolutely can, Emily, and you don't have to do it alone. The people around you want to help. You just have to let them in." The interaction left a lasting impression on everyone in the room, and Jefferson Middle quickly adopted their own buddy system and awareness workshops. Beyond her work at Willow Creek, Ms. Harper began collaborating with community organizations to address broader issues of accessibility and inclusion. She partnered with a local advocacy group to host a town hall meeting, inviting parents, teachers, and students to discuss the challenges faced by children with disabilities. The event drew a large crowd, and Ms. Harper was moved by the stories shared by attendees. Parents spoke of the obstacles their children faced in everyday life, from inaccessible playgrounds to misunderstandings about their abilities. One parent, Mr. Torres, described his son's struggles in a public park. "There's no equipment he can use, so he ends up sitting on the sidelines watching other kids play. It breaks my heart." Ms. Harper listened intently, taking notes and brainstorming solutions with the advocacy group. Together, they launched a campaign to improve accessibility in public spaces, starting with the local park. As the school year progressed, Marky began mentoring younger students who faced similar challenges. One of these students was Ethan, a shy third grader who had recently started using a wheelchair. "Hi, Ethan," Marky said, wheeling up to the boy during lunch one day. "Mind if I sit with you?" Ethan nodded hesitantly, his eyes wide with curiosity. "I know it can be tough starting out in a wheelchair," Marky said gently, "but it gets easier, I promise. And if you ever need help, I'm here." Over time, Ethan grew more comfortable, even joining Marky during recess to play modified basketball. Seeing Ethan's confidence grow reminded Marky of his own journey and reinforced his commitment to helping others. One day, Malik visited Willow Creek as part of a joint initiative between the Bright Futures Center and the school. Ms. Harper and Marky were thrilled to see him again. "Malik!" Marky called out, waving excitedly. "It's so good to see you!" Malik grinned. "Hey, Marky!" I heard you've been doing some amazing things here. The two spent the afternoon catching up, with Marky giving Malik a tour of the school's new accessible features. Malik was especially impressed by the ramps and the wheelchair-friendly playground equipment. You guys are doing incredible stuff here, Malik said to Ms. Harper later. It gives me hope for what other schools can achieve. As Marky's time at Willow Creek came to an end, he was chosen to deliver the graduation speech. Standing proudly on the stage, he addressed his classmates with heartfelt words. 4 years ago, I felt invisible, he began. But today, I stand before you as someone who feels seen, valued, and supported. That's because of all of you, my teachers, my friends, and my family. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the audience. I've learned that we're stronger together. When we embrace each other's differences, we create something beautiful. The crowd erupted in applause, many wiping away tears as they rose to their feet. Years later, the programs and initiatives started at Willow Creek continued to thrive. Ms. Harper, now a district-wide advocate for inclusive education, often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Marky, now a young adult, pursued a career in education, inspired by the teachers and mentors who had believed in him. Together, he and Ms. Harper worked to expand their message, reaching schools across the state. Their efforts became a beacon of hope for countless students, proving that with empathy and determination, real change is possible. After graduating from Willow Creek Elementary, Marky continued his journey with a growing passion for advocacy. In middle school, he joined the student council and proposed new initiatives to ensure all school events were accessible to students with disabilities. One of his first projects was revamping the school's annual field day. Traditionally, the event had included activities like relay races and tug-of-war, which often excluded students with mobility challenges. Marky worked with the council to design a more inclusive event, introducing wheelchair-friendly obstacle courses, seated volleyball, and other adaptive games. Everyone should be able to have fun, Marky explained during a council meeting. This isn't just about including students with disabilities. It's about showing that we all have something to contribute. Field Day was a resounding success, with students of all abilities participating side by side. Parents, teachers, and community members marveled at the sense of unity and joy that filled the air. Marky's efforts caught the attention of local media, and a journalist from the city newspaper requested an interview. Marky, you've become a real leader in your school, the journalist said. What motivates you to keep pushing for change? Marky thought for a moment before answering. I know what it feels like to be left out, to feel like you don't matter. I don't want anyone else to feel that way. When we include everyone, we're stronger as a community. The article, titled, A Young Advocate Inspires Change, sparked a wave of support from the community. Donations poured into the school to fund additional accessibility projects, and neighboring schools began reaching out to Marky for advice. Meanwhile, Ms. Harper's work at Willow Creek didn't go unnoticed. One day, she received a letter from the State Board of Education informing her that she had been nominated for the Educator of the Year award. Ms. Harper, this is incredible, Grace exclaimed when she heard the news. You've worked so hard to make this school a better place. Ms. Harper, though humbled, felt that the recognition belonged to everyone who had contributed to the school's transformation. This isn't just about me, she said during the award ceremony. It's about my students, my colleagues, and the incredible community that believed in the power of inclusion. During her acceptance speech, Ms. Harper shared Marky's story, crediting him as the catalyst for her own growth. He taught me that every child has a unique brilliance waiting to be nurtured, she said. I'm just grateful I had the chance to learn from him. Inspired by Marky's advocacy and Ms. Harper's leadership, Willow Creek Elementary became a hub for community events focused on inclusion. Workshops, parent-teacher panels, and student-led initiatives became regular fixtures on the school calendar. One particularly memorable event was the Empathy Fair, where students created interactive exhibits to teach their peers about different disabilities. At one station, students wore noise-canceling headphones to simulate hearing impairments, while at another, they navigated an obstacle course in wheelchairs. This is harder than I thought, one student remarked as he struggled to maneuver through the course. Exactly, Markey said with a smile. But it also shows how important it is to create spaces that work for everyone. As Markey moved on to high school, his advocacy efforts only grew stronger. He joined a statewide youth leadership council, working alongside other students to promote inclusivity across schools. During one council meeting, Markey proposed a groundbreaking idea: creating a mentorship program that paired high school students with younger children with disabilities. Having someone who understands your challenges can make all the difference, Markey explained. It's not just about guidance. It's about building friendships and showing kids they're not alone. The mentorship program quickly gained traction, and Markey became one of its most active participants. He mentored Ethan, the younger student he had befriended at Willow Creek, and watched with pride as Ethan began to come into his own. Back at Willow Creek, Ms. Harper found herself drawn to a new mission: creating a resource hub for teachers across the district. The more we share our knowledge, the more children we can help, she said during a meeting with Principal Wilson. The hub included lesson plans, training videos, and a database of adaptive tools. Ms. Harper also hosted monthly webinars, inviting guest speakers from the Bright Futures Center and other organizations. One of the most popular sessions featured Malik, now a teenager, sharing his experiences and tips for fostering inclusivity. Teachers have the power to shape how kids see the world, Malik said during his presentation. When you believe in us, it makes us believe in ourselves. By the time Markey reached his senior year of high school, he had become a prominent figure in the community. His leadership skills and academic achievements earned him multiple college scholarship offers. At his graduation ceremony, Markey was invited to give a speech as the valedictorian. Standing proudly at the podium, he reflected on his journey. I've learned that change starts with one small step, he said. It starts with seeing someone for who they are, not what they look like or what challenges they face. And when we take that step together, we can create something truly extraordinary. Years later, Markey returned to Willow Creek Elementary, not as a student, but as a guest speaker. He stood in front of a new generation of students, sharing his story and encouraging them to embrace inclusivity. Ms. Harper, now retired but still active in advocacy work, sat in the audience, her heart swelling with pride. Markey, she said after the event, you've become everything I always knew you could be. Markey smiled. That's because you gave me a chance, Ms. Harper. You showed me that I mattered, and I'll never forget that. Together, they walked through the school's halls, now adorned with murals, plaques, and reminders of the legacy they had built. The impact of Markey and Ms. Harper's work continued to ripple through the community for decades. Schools across the district adopted their programs, ensuring that every child, regardless of ability, had the opportunity to thrive. Markey, now a teacher and advocate himself, often reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He carried with him the lessons of resilience, compassion, and the power of a single voice to inspire change. As he stood in front of his own classroom, he saw a reflection of his younger self in his students, each one full of potential, waiting for someone to believe in them. And he was ready to be that someone.